Let it rot. This movement of sorts has been increasing in size and notoriety in the last couple of years. Or has it? It has certainly got the attention of a good portion of us here in the West, but why is that? Could it be that the social phenomenon is currently happening here as well? Or is it something that we'll have to deal with in the near future? To find that out, we have to go back to what thrusted this movement into the known, 2020. It's currently 2022, and we're all still reeling from the events of 2020. It was certainly a life-changing and routine-breaking year. Our relationship with the most basic and mundane aspects of our lives was severely changed and altered by completely unpredictable events, and consequently, by the response of the governance. But I want to focus on a particular aspect of the whole thing, one that affects our pockets: jobs. Needless to say, in those few months that followed the outbreak, the whole job market was brought to a standstill, with a ton of layoffs, little job openings, if any at all, and an infinite supply of uncertainty. Eventually, as the weeks passed, a lot of companies and private entrepreneurs worked around the clock to keep their businesses running, even if it had to be done from a distance. And so, during a time of isolation, millions around the world clocked in through their devices and kept the businesses running, while others, who ran the basic foundation of contemporary society, showed up personally during times of great fear and upkept the normalcy that people like you and I enjoy. Just like in 2001, the world had changed. It stands to reason that when the world changes, the people change along with it. It's kind of a prerequisite of nature. You have to adapt somehow. And this is exactly what happened around the world. Millions tried to adapt to the abnormal conditions they were presented with, and some were more successful than others. However, the one thing most of them had in common was this: time to think. Isolation could and was a great opportunity for people to take inventory, reflect about their lives, and think about their next move. Of course, if you happen to be in the unfortunate place where you were about to lose your home or starve because food wouldn't be waiting for you at the table, there was no time to think, because it was time to act. After all, that's the Maslow pyramid in a nutshell. You'll only stop to think if you can afford to. Fortunately, a lot of us around the globe could. Slowly but surely, a lot of individuals would be asked to return to the office, to resume their normal work routines, to continue working as per usual, and to continue making the exact same amount of money. Except there was just one little thing that had changed. The cost of living had gone up due to the disruption of the production and the supply chains. I mean, don't get me wrong, the purchasing power of the average citizen in most developed countries had been sitting still for decades, with some showing a slight increase and others showing exactly the opposite. The only difference this time around was that we had the chance to think about it. Here's the math. Go back to a work environment you don't particularly hold dear, plus the expenditure associated to getting to your workplace in a time where money is worth less, plus no prospects of moving up the chain. The probable result? A static career, with all the aspirations of starting a life thrown to the wayside, with a lot of hard work and stress mixed in just for good measure. It's no wonder that when things started to return to normal, we began to see a lot of attention being drawn toward the employment crisis. Businesses everywhere were hiring, searching for applicants that could fill out the positions left vacant by their predecessors. Most of these positions were entry-level and provided the same vanilla conditions/tribulations the populace had grown accustomed to for decades. And that was exactly the problem. Even though the world had changed, even though the price of everything hit historic heights, even though the prospect of a better life suddenly seemed more like fantasy than a reality, even when the problems that stood before you seemed to be the most challenging yet, you were expected to fix them and deal with them with the same old, wary, and dull tools. So it's no surprise that movements like lying flat caught our attention. Whole generations of younger Chinese workers began to weigh their options and came to the conclusion that trying so hard to succeed was no longer worth it. The system just wasn't rewarding the effort. And so, settling for a job that gave them just enough so that they could get by comfortably became preferable. Preferable to meaningless servitude under fruitless ventures. This resonated with the younger generations in the Western workforce. Even though China seems to be the most extreme example in the disparity between effort and reward, a lot of us could genuinely understand this type of response and relate to it in more ways than one. Let me ask you this: what are you supposed to do when all the effort you put in is continually rewarded with more tasks and responsibility and with gradually less benefits? What are you to think when more effort seems to get you nowhere closer to your dreams. But anyway, I don't just expect you to indulge in my viewpoint without additional context, so I thought about showing you an excerpt of a video made by Serpentza. This is a YouTuber who lived in China for years and can provide you with insight about these topics. Insight that's backed up by lived experience because he lived there for 14 years, I believe. In the following clip, he talks about the eventual evolution of the lying flat movement into the buy land or let it rot movement, while also highlighting their history.
And this is no different in mainland China. The people running around with fancy cars, throwing money everywhere and showing off their wealth are not people who have earned that money. So this whole movement of lying flat and let it rot is very squarely a middle class problem in China. These are the people that have the luxury to lie flat or let it rot. And I cannot blame them. As mentioned before, people that put in the work, the effort, that have the drive to actually work hard are never rewarded in China. In fact, they're taken advantage of. This whole idea of lie flat and let it rot is less of a movement that's happening now and more of an attitude that the middle class in China has adopted over the past couple of years. But I've got a secret for you. Lying flat, let it rot, it's not new. 过日子, which means pass the day. And this is an attitude that you find in the rural areas of China where people do as little as possible just to pass the day. It's just part of Chinese society, specifically in the middle class. It's nothing new.
And perhaps this is the crux of the matter. This is an ongoing problem with a somewhat long history, and unfortunately, it underpins the current work effort paradigm in the developed world. It's just that the current events are exacerbating this issue and breathing new life into the conversation. Perhaps lying flat, let it rot, and the employment crisis are just the newest iterations of the middle class's response to this issue. But regardless of how novel or old this type of response is, the truth remains that what we're seeing and experiencing right now is just the latest generation's response to a potential lifetime exercise in futility.